My name is Joe Perfito. I'm the president. My company is Gordon J. Gow Technologies. And our company has two brands. One is Tributaries and the other one is Clarus. So Tributaries is more of a mainline cable line, and then Clarus is a high-end cable line. I started the company in 1991. My history is I have a degree in electrical engineering from New York University. And from there, I was in the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force. I was a pilot in the Air Force. And when I left that, I went to work at an audio store and began my career there. I didn't know it was going to be my career. I enjoyed working with customers, and I enjoyed selling the products. And those products basically from Macintosh Laboratory was our main product line. And then about 6 years later, Macintosh hired me to work for them as a regional sales manager, and then as a national sales manager. So I've been in the industry for over 50 years, doing many different things. And when the company in 1990 got sold to the Japanese, Clarion purchased it, I left and I started Tributaries and Gordon J. Gow Technology. So Gordon J. Gow was the president of Macintosh, and I worked for him for all the years. I was with Macintosh for 15 years, and I worked directly for Gordon for 15 years. And I started this company as a tribute to Gordon, because during the time that I worked for Macintosh, he married my sister.
Oh.
Okay, so he was my brother-in-law.
Okay.
Yeah, good start. Yes. So then he died. He had a heart attack one day, just unexpectedly. Boom, he was gone. So my sister and I started this together, and we started it as a tribute to Gordon.
Oh, I see.
That's where Tributaries comes in. We changed the name. We made the name Tributaries because that was much better cable sound than tribute. Okay. So I started in 1991 with Tributaries Cables, and then we grew from there. So that's how we started. And the whole idea when I started the company was to have a company that we made all our products in the United States. So we did all our purchasing and all our cables, all the wire, everything was all made in the US. And that lasted for about 1 year. And we figured out that isn't going to work. Number one, that the wire that was made here in the States was very expensive, and the Chinese could do it much less expensively, and actually in some cases better. I hate to say that, but in some cases better. So what we did was we started to move offshore, and we developed the cables, but we still made them here. We still did all the final assembly, and sales and marketing all came from here in Orlando, Florida. So that's basically the history of the company. Now, Tributaries and Clarus, and we treat this as two different brands, as in Toyota and Lexus. They're still owned by the same company, Toyota, but Lexus is their high-end model, and Toyota is their lower end. So that's what we do with our cables. We keep them separate. So sometimes we have dealers that sell Tributaries and Clarus, and sometimes we have dealers that only sell Clarus or only sell Tributaries. So we have distinct dealers for the brands. That's the kind of the beginning of the company and a bit of the history.
But why audio? You was a pilot, started making cables.
How did I get into audio?
Yeah.
Yes, well, that was when I started to work at the store. When I left the service, when I left the Air Force, my brother had this store close to New York, and he had an audio store called the Stereo Shop. So I went to work there. So I was a salesman, and I began to get involved with the equipment. My first system I had, when I was in the service, My brother had this store, and I did not have any equipment at my home at that time. And I called him and said, could you send me some equipment? So he sent me a Macintosh receiver, a pair of KLH 17 speakers, and an AR turntable. So that was my first system. And I fell in love with it. I've never heard anything quite like that before. It sounded beautiful. I began to understand more about the equipment, how it's made, and what all the different parts, different things are. Sure.
So, and what are the principles and ideas that you lay into your cables?
When I started the company, I was designing the cables, and they were basically coaxial cables: center conductor, insulator, shield, and jacket. That was it. And we used that for audio and for video. And then in early 2000s, we met a fellow by the name of J. Victor. He's a designer, engineering guy that's worked for many different companies. And he was helping us with the power conditioners, because at that time we were making some Tributaries power conditioners. And he helped us find a supplier for these at that time in China. I found out that he has patents, 50 patents in high-end speaker cable or high-end cable design. When I heard that, I asked him about his designs, and he started to describe to me how he designed his cables. And he said, this cable that he has designed is a cable that will ensure that it's a smooth response, doesn't afraid of the bass or the highs. It's very neutral. And he does this by using 3 different types of conductors, shapes of conductors. So he has heavy gauge, solid core for the low frequencies, a flat wire for the mid-range, and then a spiral ribbon for the high frequencies. He said it took him 8 years to figure out how many of each, what gauge, and how to put them together. 8 years. And one of the things is he owns partial in a company in China that makes cable, it makes wire. So he could go to this company and say, make me a 100-meter roll of wire that has all these different components. See, if I went to that same company, and I do now for the things, if I could make me a cable that does X, Y, and Z, they say, fine, 5,000 meters minimum, and you pay all the startup costs, the first one. So it could be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to get a sample. Well, nobody's going to do that. But he could do that because he had ownership in the company. So they would make him 100-meter rolls. So he could try different things. So 8 years it took him to come up with the right combination of the heavy conductors, the flat wire, and the spiral ribbon to come up with the cable. So he had some samples, and we listened to them, and they were spectacular. That's the best thing I had ever heard in a cable. So we license the patents, and we make the cable in exactly the way he designed the internal, the cable inside. Then we design all the outside. We design the jacketing, we design the connectors, and all the different parts and pieces on how they all go together. And we make that all here in Orlando. So we get all the pieces and parts made from different places. We bring them into our factory, and then we do all the final assembly here. So that's the concept. So the design of the cable is such that it's neutral. It doesn't accentuate the bass or the highs or the mids. It's extremely neutral. And that's the sign of a good cable. Does not influence, it does not have its own sound.
And what materials do you use in your cables?
The copper is all PCOCC. Also, we're using another grade of oxygen-free copper that is pure copper. Originally, the PCOCC was pure copper from Ono continuous casting. Very well-known cable. It's the purest cable in the world. Unfortunately, they stopped making it about 2 years ago. So we now buy another wire that's very similar. It's made from the same process, but they can't call it Ono copper because that's somebody else's name. So they just call it pure copper from continuous casting. It's the method of how they pull the portion, how they draw the cable and the temperature that they draw it at. So that's the copper. It's the highest grade of copper available today in the world. That's what we use there. And then for the connectors, all our connectors on our Clarus cables are using either tellurium copper or beryllium copper. Those are two copper alloys that have different characteristics. They're very highly conductive, but they also have specific characteristics. For instance, the beryllium copper tends to be tough. It tends to be very hard copper. So we use that for the center pin on the RCA and also for the XLR pins and for the spade lugs, because those need to be sturdy. Banana plug needs to be flexible so that when you plug it in, it can close up and then spring back. And for that, we use the tellurium copper. And we also use that for the ground plane on the RCA connector. So now those become flexible. So we use these special materials to make sure that we have the best contact area and the highest conductivity for the cable.
Do you use silver in your cables?
We use silver only on the digital cables. When we used to use silver on our audio cables, but it made them too bright. You know, there are some companies that use silver plating, and I say those are cables for old men, you know, because their hearing is not so good in the high frequencies, and the silver boosts the highs. But I don't want my cables to be like tone controls.
So we came to the next question. Who is your client? I see very young people. They use copper, not silver. Yeah.
Yes, we use copper, not silver. Only silver for the digital. Of course, we do not sell to the public. We do not sell to the end user. We only sell to dealers and distributors. So our dealers here are audio stores that sell the better equipment. So that's now at the end user, the people who buy our products, they're the people who love music. And then they also have the equipment necessary to produce the best sound. And we tell our people that cables are as important a component in the system as the speakers, the amplifier, or the preamp processor. The cables are as important because if it's not the right cable, you're not going to get the correct sound from the preamp and from the power amplifier. It's going to be changed by the cables. So the cables are extremely important. Without the cables being matched properly to the equipment, the sound won't be as good as it should be. So we say that our cables will bring the best return on investment that the customer has made in his components. So if he spent a lot of money on his components, he's going to want the best sound from that system. And that's what our cables will do.
How many people do you have in your company?
We have 12. Not many, no, but everything is handmade. So we do everything here. Solder, assembly, testing, sales, marketing, advertising, everything is done from here.
Please tell us about your lines, the different models of your cables.
Okay, so in the Tributaries line, which is our basic line, we have 4 levels of audio cable, series 2, 4, 6, and 8. Very simple, 2, 4, 6, and 8. So 2 is the least expensive, 8 is the most highest performance. Then when we get to Clarus, which is the next level up, we have 2 models, Aqua and Crimson. So we make RCA cables, we call single-ended. We make XLR balanced cables. We make digital cables, digital audio cables. We make subwoofer cables. We make video cables also, although not too many people buy video cables anymore. And we make HDMI cables. HDMI is a very big part of our business in the US. And we have a very excellent reputation for our HDMI cables. HDMI is the most problematic cable ever made. You know, many people have problems with HDMI cables. They work, they don't work, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And
you mean quality?
Quality, and also it's the engineering of the cable and the testing. All our HDMI cables come from China. Those are all made in China. Everybody's cables are made in China. The difficulty is there are many manufacturers of HDMI cables in China. Some not so good and some very good. The very good ones are more expensive than the very inexpensive ones. So even though for the good ones, when we're going to start a new model, let's say, we get samples from our supplier and then we send them to a third-party laboratory. We send them to a lab that tests them to see what the actual performance is. The HDMI has very specific specifications on the amount of signal that it carries. So, but we have no way of testing that. That's to have the equipment to test that properly is about $250,000 for the test equipment. So we send the samples to a laboratory. They test it for us and tell us whether it actually will do that performance. And then if it does, then we buy them from our supplier. And then when we get them in, we have them retested to make sure that they are what the supplier in China says they are. The Chinese tend to, sometimes they make something the first time and you say, okay, it's good, and you order it. And then when it comes, it's not the same thing that you had the first time. They change it inside, but you can't see they made the change, you know? So we have a double check on all of that. So because of that, and then we test every HDMI cable here before we package it, before we ship it. So we do hand testing on 100% of the HDMI cables. So when they leave our plant, they work. You know, dealer can't say they got a cable that was a bad cable. I said, no, 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 no. If that cable didn't work when you have it, you broke it. I sent you a good cable. So our customers trust us with our HDMI. So it's a big part of the business.
As far as I know, it's very difficult to make a long HDMI cable.
Those are the ones that have the most problems, are the long ones. But because we hand test them here before we ship them, if it's a bad one, we catch it here. It doesn't go out to a customer. We catch it before it goes.
What plans do you have for future?
For the future. So for the future, on the tributary side, we are moving now with the HDMI 2.1 cables, which are the 40 gig cables. Those are the new high performance cables for 8K 60, which is not available. There is no content. There is no, nothing to watch at that level yet. Probably 2 years, 3 years down the road, we'll start to see that come. But all our cables are changing over to the 48 gig cables now, so that our customers have that when they're ready for the new content. On the Clarus side, we are expanding our digital to analog converter business. We are in the process now of designing a new tabletop DAC that will be able to take high quality, high definition music tracks and convert that for analog to use on headphones or use in the sound system and audio system. So we're going more into on the 2-channel side with higher end cables and also a DAC And we're also working on replacement headphone cables for high quality headphones. So that's our future, going in the direction of 2-channel audio.
Did you have any problems with coronavirus suppliers?
Oh, yes, we did have some problems, but because we had placed orders early enough, we were able to get most everything in. So we have shortages on 1 or 2 of our different components, but 99% of everything that we sell, we have in stock.
What are the secrets of the best cable?
The secrets of the best cable. Isn't that a good question? The secrets of the best cable. I think the secrets of the best cable is a design that has that makes a cable that is completely neutral, that doesn't change anything, that takes that signal from one component to another and doesn't change at all. You know, one of the things that we found in this is sometimes we talk about noise, noise in a system. And I'm not talking about not humming or buzzing, nothing like that. I'm talking about this low-level signal that obscures the low-level information, covers it up. But you don't know that it covers it up because you can't hear it. And when you have the right, like for instance, the power conditioners, when we use our power conditioner or our power cables, also very important part, the power cables, it actually lifts that covering off of that low-level information. And now you can hear things that were not there before because it's being covered up by this low-level noise. But it's not, you don't know until you take it away that all of a sudden there's more music. And where that becomes really important is in the size of the sound stage, the depth of the sound stage, the height of the sound stage. How do we know? How do we hear sound stage? I mean, how does that signal get to our ears where the sound stage is very compressed or very wide open? When you use the power cable, the first time I tried a power cable, that's what happened. The sound stage went from here to there. And it was just because we changed the power cable. So now why? How is that possible? That a short wire can cause that much change? There are some reasons. I mean, you can talk about this. One of them is the windings that we do in our power cable lower the noise. So that noise that's obscuring that information is pulled away. So all of a sudden there's information that wasn't there before. That information happens to be soundstage information, not frequency. It's not bright or more bassy or more mid-range. It's the soundstage, heights and distance, and also the imaging. How strong is that image? So that's one. Number two is that we use enough shielding on our power cable to keep out all the outside information that can get onto the power cable and then go into the power supply. And that also covers up this low-level detail. So that's how it works. It's all in the design and the engineering. It works. If you get a chance to try our Clarus power cable, I think you'll be very, very pleased and very astonished by how good they are and how much of a difference they can make. We have customers that come back to us and say, I've changed my power cables and it's the biggest change I ever had in my system. It's as good as changing the whole component. So instead of getting a new amplifier, I got this new power cable and I'm happy with it. I don't have to change the power amp. It's amazing how much of a change these cables can make.
That's great. What music do you listen to?
Do I listen to all? I love classical music. I like listening to Frank Sinatra. I like listening to Nat King Cole, the Beatles, ABBA, Yeah. My range is wide, and jazz. You know, I like the light jazz, things like Dave Brubeck, Take Five, my favorite albums.
And what system do you have now?
Right now, at home, I have a Macintosh power amplifier, a 257. That's a 7-channel amplifier. And I have an MX123 Macintosh preamp processor. And the speakers that I use, I built in when we built the cabinets on them about a number of years ago. And they're Macintosh speakers. They're called XRT18. This is separate low frequency and mid in one box, and then 18 tweeters in a row. And so that's my system at home. And the turntable is a project.
Was it difficult to get into the market and to take share of it?
Yes, it's going to take time because although we did sell, Tributaries had been sold in Moscow prior by another company for a number of years. And for whatever reason, they stopped purchasing. We never did really find out why, but they did. And but Technologica has picked that up now, and I think they'll do really well with it. I think it's always a case of the dealers that they sell to have to try it and listen to it. Once they try it and listen to it, and they hear how good it sounds, how good it makes the equipment sound, that is where the magic is. That's what makes people buy. You know, you can tell somebody, you can talk to somebody and say, oh, it has this, it has that. But until they hear it, they can't understand.
That's right.
Right? And when they hear it, they say, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. That's fabulous.
How do you test? Do you have listening tests?
Oh, yes, we have listening. We have a Macintosh system here in our facility, along with a pair of paradigm speakers. So when we have a new model or we have something that we want to check, we connect it up onto our system. Now, for normal testing, we do test on all our cables before we ship them. So after they're made, they're visibly checked to make sure that there's no marks, there's no cosmetic difficulty there. And then we connect them into an electronic tester to make sure that there's no short circuits, you know, things like that. And then they're packaged and shipped.
Do you have cables in your hands? Can you show us something?
So this is one of our speaker cables. This is Clarus Crimson speaker cable. And this is a bi-wire. So we have 2 on one side and 4 on the other. And the breakout, you can see how you can see that.
Yeah, let me see.
That's the breakout. And this is just the transition to go from the speaker to the 4 legs. So that's how they look. And we use silicon tubes. These are silicon tubes. Inside the tube are the 2 conductors, but it makes it a nice look as it goes from the one piece to the other. Very consistent quality look on that. So that's crimson. And the aqua is the less one. And you can see the difference between the two. The aqua is smaller, so it's got less gauge, less copper in it, and it's a different design internally. So those are the 2 on that for the speakers. The audio cables, so these are the audio cables. These are the arrows. All our Clarus cables are directional. Yeah, these are all directional because the copper is directional. When we get the copper, it is labeled as which direction to regulate it. And then the connectors are these RCA connectors. And these are the new connectors that have the tellurium. It's got a hollow center pin. And then the ground on the outside is beryllium copper. And again, they're all hand assembled and all made here. You can see how everything fits. Everything is very beautifully made. So in the XLR cables, these are the XLRs. Now, thing I want you to see is, I don't know if you can see that, 2 are recessed, 1 is forward. Pin 1 is the ground. So when you connect this in, if you forget and you leave your amplifier on, the ground will connect first before the signal. So no big pops or snaps that can blow the woofer or tweeter. Yeah, so here's our power cable. So that's what it looks like on that side. But we don't do all that intertwining. There's too much capacitance and inductance in those cables. These cables are all together in one, so there's none of that. So that's the power cable. And these are all solid copper conductors. And we make that with the IEC end and also make it with a C7.
In which countries are your cables sold most?
Well, Australia, South Africa, now Russia, of course, and Hong Kong. Hong Kong is our #1 distributor for Clarus. And Russia actually is either #2 or #3.
And what cables are best for Macintosh?
Well, we make Macintosh cables. We are the manufacturer, the OEM for Macintosh cables. Many of our dealers who are Macintosh dealers use our Clarus cables with the Macintosh equipment.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting.
Yeah. Well, you know, the whole company is based on personal relationships with our dealers, with our suppliers, with our employees. You know, it's all about the people. It's all about, especially in this industry, you know, because it's all about music. It's all about loving music and the equipment and being involved in it. It's emotional. It's not just buying and selling. It's like my son came to me years ago and said to me, I want to learn your business. He wanted to work for me to learn my business. And I said, you can't learn my business by working for me. We're just buying and selling. You work at a store and learn about the equipment, who buys it, why they buy it, how they buy it, what they do with it when they buy it. You have to go to people's homes and install it and learn how that works, because that's where the meat is. That's where the you know, the emotion comes from, because you fall in love with the equipment, you fall in love with the sound, and then you build these relationships with your customers, with your dealers, and they buy from you because not only you have good product, but you're a good person to work with, and they know they can depend upon you and they trust you. And that's how we build our business.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.